Hi, I'm Maris, and I paid for a family trip I wasn't invited to. Yeah, you heard that right. After gifting my sister a villa in Santorini as a wedding present, my mother texted me, "Your brother-in-law prefers to keep it just family," as if I wasn't. So I did what any forgotten daughter would do. I canceled every reservation, and I sold the house. Now they're back. And the silence? It's deafening, but not mine. Mine finally feels peaceful. You ever wonder what it sounds like when the quiet one stops playing along? Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment below. I want to know who else has ever been pushed aside just because you didn't fit their version of family. It was one of those soft Seattle mornings when the fog moved like breath over the bay. I stood at my kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside my laptop, scrolling through flight confirmations for the Europe trip. I had everything lined up, Paris first, then the Greek islands, ending in Santorini, where I just bought Eleni and Darian a beachfront villa as a wedding gift. I remember thinking how proud Mom would be, how she'd tell everyone her girls were finally close again. I pictured her smile when she saw what I'd done. Then my phone buzzed. Just a small sound, but it split the quiet like glass. It was from her. "You won't be joining us. Darian prefers to keep it just family." I read it twice before it sank in. Once more for good measure. The words were so plain, so polite, it took a few seconds to feel the sting. Then it hit all at once. Like being told, kindly, that you no longer exist. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen over the glass. The message didn't make sense. I'd paid for the tickets, the villa, the private tours, everything. I even handled the restaurant reservations because Eleni said she was too overwhelmed with wedding planning. Just family. I tried calling Mom, no answer, tried Eleni, straight to voicemail. When I texted Darian, he replied almost instantly, "Thanks again for your generosity. You're amazing." That word, amazing, felt like salt on an open wound. I could almost hear his smug tone. He had that habit of talking like every favor was a performance. The kind of man who could smile while twisting the knife. My kitchen suddenly felt too bright. I turned off the coffee maker, though it wasn't making a sound. The silence pressed against me. I told myself not to overreact, that maybe there was some mix-up, maybe the message meant something else. But deep down, I knew it didn't. Mom's words had always been simple, sharp, and final. I leaned against the counter, staring out the window. The city looked calm. Ordinary people walking dogs, cars moving steadily through the mist. My world hadn't ended, but something inside me had quietly cracked. "You won't be joining us." It looped in, my mind, like a broken song lyric. I went back to my phone, scrolled up through the messages. Nothing kind, nothing soft, just logistics. I'd been demoted from daughter to event sponsor, erased from my own generosity. My stomach turned. I set the phone down and rubbed my temples. For a moment, I thought about calling again, about demanding an explanation. But the truth was, I already knew the answer. It wasn't new. This was just the loudest version of something that had been whispered all my life. When I was 8, Mom told Eleni she had the spark and told me I had the feelings. When I won a spelling bee, she said Eleni had the real talent for people. I was the quiet one, the emotional one, the one she'd pat on the shoulder and say, "Don't take things so seriously." And now, at 42, I'd just been reminded I was still that same girl, standing a step behind in every family photo. The air in the kitchen felt heavy. I picked up the gift I'd wrapped earlier that week, a small crystal frame etched with the words, "To family, always." It was supposed to go in their honeymoon basket, next to the note I'd written, "Love doesn't keep score." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp to cry over. The frame caught a sliver of sunlight, scattering tiny reflections on the counter. For a second, it looked beautiful. Then I turned it face down. My phone screen dimmed again. That message still there. Those 6 cold words. You won't be joining us. It felt like they were etched on glass, too. I sat down at the table, trying to breathe evenly, but the quiet had a pulse now, steady and cruel. My heart thudded in sync with it. I whispered under my breath, not sure who I was talking to. If I'm not family, then who exactly did I pay for? The words hung in the air. No one answered, of course. The fog outside had lifted a little, the sunlight breaking through like a cruel joke. I reached for my laptop, the one still open from checking itineraries. I scrolled through the confirmations, flights, hotels, the villa, all booked under my name. Every reservation, every cent. The realization came slow, then sharp. They couldn't even take this trip without me. My pulse steadied. I exhaled, long and low. The humiliation settled into something else, something colder, clearer. I wasn't erased, not yet. The light had shifted by the time I left the kitchen. Afternoon rain had begun tapping gently against the windows, and that dull gray Seattle sky wrapped around the house like a wet blanket. I walked down the hallway toward my home office, the wrapped crystal frame still in my hands. I didn't really mean to carry it. I think my fingers just needed to hold something solid, something that didn't change its meaning overnight. The office was a mess. Papers I hadn't touched in weeks were scattered across the desk. Unopened envelopes stacked beside my monitor like tiny tombstones. A contract I'd meant to sign days ago sat curled at the corners. I dropped the gift box on the table with a soft thud. It landed between a coffee mug with dried rings and a manila folder labeled Client Witherspoon. I sat down in my chair and stared at it. This beautiful little frame I'd picked out after combing through a dozen overpriced wedding boutiques. The engraving shimmered faintly under the cloudy light. To family always. I muttered, "What a joke." I clicked open my phone again. Maybe there was more. Maybe I missed something in the messages. Something that made this less cruel. I scrolled. Mom's text still sat there like a loaded trap. You won't be joining us. Darian prefers to keep it just family. Eleni hadn't said anything, not a single word, not even a lazy, "Hey, call you later." And Darian, just that smug little thank you, like I was some Airbnb host they'd never meet in person. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I started typing. Is this a mistake? Deleted it. I paid for the whole trip. Was I not clear? Deleted that too. What was the point? They knew exactly what they were doing. They always had. This wasn't confusion. This was exclusion served cold, wrapped in politeness so I'd feel guilty for being hurt. And I did. I really did. The thing is, I hadn't bought that villa in Santorini to impress anyone. I did it because for one moment at the engagement party, Eleni had grabbed my hand with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You've always been the best part of this family." And Mom had nodded, proud. I actually thought, for that brief flicker, that I was finally seen, that I'd done something that mattered. But apparently, being useful doesn't mean being included. I glanced back at the frame, still sitting there, all perfect and untouched. I reached for it again. The box felt heavier now. And then, out of nowhere, a memory cut through. My 10th birthday. Eleni had a unicorn cake the size of a beach ball the year before. She had balloons, glitter candles, even a magician Mom found through the PTA. I remember it all because I helped set it up. When it came to my birthday, Mom handed me a cupcake with one candle and said, "You don't need all that. You're the easy one." Easy. As if I didn't need joy. As if wanting more was greedy. Even then, I remember thinking, if I keep being helpful, maybe next year I'll get balloons too. I didn't. I learned early, love was earned, and only loud, glittering joy was rewarded. Quiet effort? That got a pat on the head and the leftovers. A sound outside the window brought me back to the present. Raindrops had gathered in thick streaks on the glass, warping the view like a bad memory. I turned the frame over in my hands. Something about the way it caught the light annoyed me. It was too clean, too hopeful. I whispered, almost to myself, "I'll deliver it later." And I opened the drawer beside my desk and slid the box inside. I closed it gently. The room fell quiet again. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The anger hadn't come yet, not fully. It was still brewing behind something softer, something like shame. Maybe they didn't forget me. Maybe they just needed me invisible. That was the part I couldn't stop thinking about, that maybe my job was to give and stay out of the picture. And I had played that part so well, they didn't even have to ask me to step aside. They just assumed I would. And I had, for years, until now. I didn't move for a long time, just sat there while the sky outside dimmed and the rain got heavier. That night, I had a dream I've had before, but never quite like this. I was standing on the beach in Santorini, barefoot in the sand, the salt air in my lungs. The villa I'd bought was glowing with warm lights, laughter spilling out from the open windows. I saw them inside, Mom pouring wine, Eleni dancing barefoot, Darian kissing her neck like a man in a commercial. They were all in there, happy, whole, laughing like they were the stars of a movie I'd never been cast in. And I was outside the gate, just watching, not angry, not crying, just gone. When I woke up, it was still dark. The rain had stopped. A quiet had settled over the house like dust. I sat up, heart beating slow and steady. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I turned on my laptop, not to check for texts or answers. I wasn't searching for closure. I opened my booking folder. Every payment, every villa confirmation, every deed, document, insurance policy, and reservation still in my name. And suddenly, for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel small. I stayed there in the dark for a long time, just listening. No rain, no wind, just the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. And in that quiet, something settled in me. Not peace, not rage either. Just a strange kind of awareness, like I was finally noticing the room I'd lived in for years. By the time morning came, the clouds had thinned out, and a pale, tired light filtered through the blinds. I didn't even bother making new coffee. Yesterday's was still half full and cold, but I sipped it anyway and opened the manila folder that had been buried under a pile of catalogs and unopened birthday cards. The receipts were still there. Printed copies, digital confirmations, contracts with my signature stamped at the bottom. Flights to Paris, transfer bookings to Athens. The Santorini Villa's deed, still under my name. I hadn't transferred anything. I just told everyone it was a gift. And they believed me. Every single detail, every dollar had gone through me. I rubbed the crease between my eyes and looked around the office. It wasn't even about the money. It was what the paper meant. What it had always meant. Control. I started printing, one by one, laying the pages across the dining table like pieces to a crime scene. I organized them by date, deposits, confirmations, itineraries. The villa's title came last. I held it a little longer before placing it down. Then I just stared. Let it all sink in. This wasn't kindness, I said out loud to no one. This was convenience. And I was the fool who thought they saw me. I stood there for minutes, maybe more, looking at those papers like they were evidence in a trial I hadn't even realized I was a defendant in. And suddenly, I breathed deeper. I felt it, this faint pulse in my chest I hadn't recognized in years. I'd been moving through my life thinking small meant good. That shrinking yourself for others was love. That making space meant you'd earn a spot in the picture. Turns out, they liked me better out of frame. The sound of my phone buzzing cut through the stillness. I walked over, picked it up. Mom. Of course. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, calm. Hi, I said. Hi, sweetheart, she replied, that overly bright tone she uses when she wants something. I was just thinking about you. Were you? She didn't wait. I know things felt a little tense yesterday. Elaine's been so overwhelmed with everything. She's just trying to keep things easy, you know? And Darian's family has all these expectations. Just be kind, okay? It's her big moment. I leaned against the wall, staring at the documents spread across the table. I'm always kind, Mom, I said quietly. You taught me that. There was a pause, a small beat of silence that told me she caught the edge in my voice, even if she didn't know what to do with it. Well, she said, uncertain now, I'm glad we talked. She hung up before I could say anything else. I looked at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down next to the pile of receipts. I didn't feel hurt this time. I felt clear. And clarity? It's a dangerous thing. I sat back down and opened my laptop again, pulled up my email. I began forwarding myself every confirmation, every digital receipt, every signed agreement. I compiled the files into a neat folder. Santorini, proof. I wasn't planning anything yet. Not revenge, not retaliation. I just wanted truth. Documented, named. Because for years I'd been told I remembered things wrong, that I overreacted, that I was too sensitive. But paper doesn't lie. Paper doesn't blink and pretend they didn't say it that way. I clicked through the images of the villa, the one I toured virtually a dozen times before choosing it. The terrace overlooking the sea, the infinity pool Eleni had cried over on FaceTime. I clicked on the title again, my name plain as daylight. Then the question came, quiet, creeping. If I use this, does that make me just like them? I hesitated, but then I remembered something my old therapist used to say, back when I actually made time for appointments. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're clarity. And maybe for once, I wasn't here to be good. Maybe I was here to be clear. The sound of the neighbor's car starting outside snapped me out of it. The world was still turning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just watching it spin without me. I stood up. The blinds cast pale stripes of light across the table. I looked out the window. The trees were still dripping from last night's rain. They said I wasn't family, I whispered to the glass. Let's see how far family really goes without me. Then I walked back to my desk, picked up my phone again. This time, I wasn't waiting for messages. I was making calls to the travel agency, to the villa's management team, to the bank, to my attorney. And every call started the same way. My name is Maris Caldwell. Yes, I'm the account holder. I ended the call and sat still for a moment, phone in hand. The silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then slid the phone into my bag, grabbed my keys, and stepped into the golden light of late afternoon. The drive downtown was quiet. Just me, the sound of tires on pavement, and the occasional stoplights slicing up my thoughts. I parked across from the travel agency, letting the engine idle a moment before turning it off. Outside, traffic pulsed past, steady and indifferent. Inside the car, it was still, like I was in a pause between heartbeats. I didn't need to go inside. That part was already done. I'd made the call earlier, spoke with the agent I'd used when I first booked everything. Her voice was clipped, professional. Yes, Ms. Caldwell, I see the reservations here. Click. Yes, they're all refundable. Click. Would you like me to proceed? I had nodded before realizing she couldn't see me. Yes, cancel all of it. There was a pause, just long enough to feel like judgment. Then the sound of keys clicking. "You've successfully reversed $12,800, she said. I could hear the printer starting behind her. "The refunds will be processed within 5 to 7 business days. Is there anything else you'd like to do?" "No," I replied. "That'll be enough." Now, sitting in my car outside their office, I replayed that call in my head. I didn't feel guilt, not even a little. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, not anymore. I pulled out my phone and checked my email. Confirmation emails rolled in like a quiet wave. Refund processed, trip canceled. Travel insurance terminated. Each one felt like a release valve turning. One breath in, one breath out. I scrolled further, into the folder I'd labeled Santorini. The villa's photos still glowed on the screen, all sea views and soft lighting. The contract was there too. I tapped it open, scanned to the section I'd highlighted months ago. Owner, Maris Caldwell. There'd been no transfer, no legal signing, just my voice over dinner one night saying, "It's yours." A wedding gift. A verbal promise. Nothing binding, nothing permanent. The next call was to my attorney. He remembered me right away. "Ah, Ms. Caldwell, the Santorini property. Beautiful choice." "I have a question," I said. "Technically, who owns it?" "You do," he answered without hesitation. "The deed is in your name. Nothing has changed that." "And what can I do with it?" "Anything you'd like. Rent it out, sell it, move in yourself. It's yours." I stared out at the skyline from the driver's seat, watching sunlight catch on the glass buildings. "Good," I said quietly. "Then I'm done being generous." The words left my mouth before I even thought them through. But once they were out, they sat heavy, like stones dropped into water. No ripples, just final. My phone buzzed. A message from Martha, my coworker at the agency. "Lunch this week? You've been quiet." I smiled a little. Martha had a knack for texting at the exact right moment, never overstepping, but always showing up. I typed back, "I'm just cleaning house." She replied with a thumbs up. That was it. No questions, no judgment. I appreciated that more than she knew. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a second. Not to nap, just to breathe. That quiet hum inside me had changed. It wasn't anxiety, it wasn't resentment either. It was calm, steady, the kind of feeling that comes from knowing you're finally taking your name back from people who only used it. I opened my eyes and tapped my screen again, returning to the very first message that had started it all. "You won't be joining us. Darian prefers to keep it just family." I stared at the words like they were written in another language. Cold, dismissive, so familiar. I tapped the notes icon on my phone and typed slowly, "Neither will my money." I saved it. Just for me. A private monument. Somewhere in the background, a bird screeched. Car doors slammed. The light was turning orange now, stretching shadows across the dashboard. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like repair. For the first time, I saw how deep the roots went, how I'd been taught to tie my worth to what I could do for others. Serve, smile, shrink. And in return, they'd call me thoughtful, or so strong. Or worse, say nothing at all. But that programming, it was breaking. "They taught me kindness as a cage," I murmured. "I'm teaching myself freedom as a language." I started the car, pulled out into traffic. The city was still pulsing, but I wasn't just another blur moving through it. I felt grounded, present. The screen lit up with another message as I hit the next red light. "We're boarding now. So excited." Mom. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I watched the message fade. Then I whispered, almost smiling, "So am I." I turned the corner, merged into the next lane, and drove straight toward my lawyer's office. The decision had already been made. The decision had already been made. There was nothing left to debate, nothing left to justify. I parked in front of Mr. Lang's office just before 9 a.m., the sky above blanketed in that muted, overcast gray that Seattle wears like a second skin. There was a stillness to it, an eerie quiet before rain that felt almost like the city was holding its breath for me. I sat in my car a moment longer, staring at the building, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles stiffened. This wasn't just a meeting with my attorney, it was an undoing, a reset. And I wasn't scared. I was clear. Mr. Lang's office smelled like coffee and old books, the kind of room where heavy truths are spoken in low tones. He greeted me with his usual calm, that measured cadence only lawyers and therapists seem to master. We exchanged brief pleasantries, though he could tell I wasn't here for small talk, and within 5 minutes, the papers were on the desk in front of me. "You're authorizing the sale of the villa," he said, gently, eyes scanning my face for even a flicker of hesitation. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "List it immediately. Don't wait. I don't care about market timing." He nodded, flipping to the first page. "The title is clean, still solely under your name. You'll have full discretion." He paused, as if waiting for an explanation. But I didn't owe him, or anyone, one. I picked up the pen and signed the first page, then the next, then the next. My signature flowed slowly, almost graceful, and with every stroke something loosened in my chest. It wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was closure. "I gave them a house as proof of love," I said aloud, more to myself than to him. "I'm selling it as proof I've learned." Lang gave a quiet hum, not of judgment but understanding. The last time I had seen the villa was in a photograph my sister had texted. Eleni, in a white linen sundress, barefoot on the marble steps, holding a glass of wine. Darian behind her, grinning like he owned the ocean. My mother had commented, "So perfect, just like a magazine." There had been no mention of me, no trace. I finished signing and slid the folder across the desk. "Once we receive a qualified offer," Mr. Lang said, "we can close within 2 weeks." "Make it happen," I said. "And if anyone calls asking questions, redirect them to me. No exceptions." He gave a small smile, then stood to walk me out. I thanked him and stepped back into the chilled morning air. The sidewalk glistened from an earlier drizzle. I turned toward my car, but something caught my eye through the fogged window of a nearby cafe. A family, 2 older parents, 2 adult daughters, sat close together at a small corner table. One of the daughters was laughing so hard she slapped the table. The other leaned in, eyes full of something warm and proud. Their mother wiped her glasses on her napkin while the father reached for the check. It was such an ordinary scene, yet something about it pierced right through me. Not jealousy, not longing, something quieter. I watched them for another beat before whispering under my breath, "That's not my family, but maybe one day I'll have one that sees me." I didn't cry. I didn't look away in pain. I just turned and walked to my car, each step carrying a little less weight than the one before. By the time I got home, the rain had started. Not a downpour, just a persistent mist that made the window glass murky. I slipped off my coat, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. It took 2 minutes to upload the listing draft and hit publish. Luxury beachfront property, Santorini, Greece, available immediately. I read the listing twice, then refreshed the page. The photo of the villa filled the screen. Those whitewashed walls, the infinity pool, the blue shutters I had paid extra for because my mother once said they reminded her of her honeymoon. Every detail had been a gesture, every stone a sacrifice. And now, all of it had a price tag. The silence in the house was heavy but not haunting. It was the silence of finally letting go. The kind you feel after a long, bitter conversation where you've said all that needed to be said. Not loud, not cruel, just final. My phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it at first. When it buzzed again, I glanced over. A text from my mother. "We're boarding now. So excited." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another postcard from the world where I had never truly belonged. I let the screen go dark, then spoke into the room, barely above a whisper. "So am I." Evening came quickly. I heated a bowl of soup, stood at the sink while I ate it, then set the bowl aside half full. The phone rang again, this time a number I recognized from the travel agency. I let it ring out, voicemail. Then another call. Elaine's assistant, probably scrambling for a confirmation, a backup plan, an explanation. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them that anymore. Just after 8 p.m., Mr. Lang called back. "We already have an offer. Full cash, buyers out of London, no contingencies." I didn't blink. I didn't ask the price. I just replied, calm and cold. "Accept it." Then I ended the call and stared out the window into the dark. Let them land in Paris. Let them arrive at the villa. Let them knock on doors that no longer open for them. I had erased the map they used to erase me, and I felt quiet, not triumphant, not giddy, just still, like standing in the center of a storm, untouched while everything else spun around me. I sat on the couch that evening with the rain soft tapping the windows, Seattle's sky bruised and heavy, the kind that made the streetlights blur by 6 p.m. I had just set my phone down when it rang. My mother, of course. Her voice hit my ear fast, high-pitched, sharp around the edges. "Maris, the hotel says our reservation is gone. Did you change something?" I didn't even blink. "I didn't change anything," I said, my voice steady. "I just canceled what was mine." There was a pause, then noise on her end. Frantic, muffled. Eleni, I assumed, raising her voice in the background, probably trying to log into something with no access anymore. "You can't just, Maris, we're standing in the lobby." "Then maybe find another lobby," I replied calmly, and I hung up. No apology, no justification, not this time. I stared at the screen a few seconds longer than necessary. The silence afterward wasn't awkward or cutting. It felt earned, like something I'd been waiting to hear for years had finally arrived. Nothing. And nothing never sounded so good. That was the sound of me not explaining myself anymore. I leaned back into the couch, letting the soft creak of old cushions press against my spine. My fingers lightly brushed the edge of my coffee mug, still warm from the half-filled pour I'd forgotten earlier. And just like that, I was 12 again. I didn't mean to drift into memory. It came uninvited, like muscle memory. It was a Tuesday. I'd come home from school with a bloody knee, humiliated from a fall in gym. Eleni had been screaming at our mother because someone used her brush, crying, red in the face. My mother dropped everything, wrapped her arms around her like she was made of glass. I stood there with blood trailing down my leg. She looked at me and said, "You'll be fine. You're the strong one." That sentence had stuck like gum on the bottom of my ribs. I'd learned silence that day, and I'd worn it like a good daughter's badge ever since. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Gavin. I actually smiled a little before answering. I could picture him perfectly. Tight jaw, finger jabbing the air even though no one was there to see it. "You have any idea what you've done?" he snapped. "People are staring at us." "Must be hard for you," I said, shifting the phone to my other ear. "You're insane, Maris. You—" "No," I cut in, calm as ever. "I was generous. There's a difference." And I ended the call. The rain had picked up, a low hiss against the windows. A rhythm I hadn't noticed until my thoughts emptied enough to hear it. My phone, the same phone that used to carry their criticisms, guilt trips, Their half-hearted, "Are you okay?" texts now buzzed. With their discomfort, their unraveling, their static. But for me, each alert made me lighter, like shedding an old coat you didn't know was suffocating you. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to argue. I just needed to press a button. The ultimate equalizer, silence. An hour passed, maybe more. I opened my laptop, cleared out some old documents, deleted a few saved files from the Europe folder, like closing a drawer you'd kept locked too long. I didn't hesitate, not once. Then a text came in. "Martha, you did something brave today, didn't you?" I stared at it, my thumb hovering. I typed slowly. I just stopped pretending. She didn't ask more. She never did. That's why I trusted her. The sky deepened outside, turning the room into soft shadows and streetlight stripes across the floor. The quiet now wasn't lonely. It was mine. Entirely mine. I glanced down at my phone again. A new notification. This time, a voice message. My mother. I hesitated. Not because I was scared, but because, for once, I held the power of pause, of choice. I could let her words sit in that bubble forever. But I tapped it. Her voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it, wavered through the speaker. "You sold the villa?" I didn't answer out loud, just leaned back into the chair, eyes closed, smile curling, soft but unshakable. "Yes, Mom. I sold the dream you built on my back." And for 2 whole days, the world was quiet. Until it wasn't. It was a Sunday when the knock came. Sharp, impatient, the kind that carries entitlement. The kind I'd grown up recognizing before I could spell it. Rain streaked down the windows, washing the city in gray. I opened the door, and there she was, my mother. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her expensive scarf damp and crumpled around her neck. The silk still screamed luxury, but her face told a different story. Pale, trembling, exhausted. She looked smaller than I remembered. "How could you humiliate us like this?" she said, her voice brittle, trembling at the edges. I didn't move aside yet. I just watched her. The woman who raised me, the woman who had taught me how to apologize for existing. "How could you use me like that?" I replied quietly. The rain filled the silence between us, a steady, cold rhythm. Finally, I stepped back, motioning for her to come in. She walked past me, dripping onto the hardwood floor, still clutching that scarf like a flag of surrender. "You've always been so dramatic, Maris. You could have just talked to us." "Talked?" I said, almost smiling. "You mean talk while you decide what parts of me count as family this week?" Her eyes darted to mine, wide but guarded. "You've always been the strong one. Your sister needed this more than you did." I let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "You mean she took more?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, she didn't have the script ready. The room filled with silence, heavy and alive. I could hear the rain sliding down the window pane, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even the rhythm of my own pulse. Steady, grounded. She turned away, looking around my apartment like she was searching for something familiar, something she could control. Her eyes landed on the table. Her scarf slipped from her shoulders as she sat down. It fell across the wood, pale blue with a pattern of tiny leaves. The same pattern as the napkin I had folded in the first chapter of my life. The one she had once called sweet, before forgetting I'd even made it. This time, I didn't pick it up. It stayed there untouched, a symbol of everything I had stopped carrying for her. "I don't understand you anymore," she whispered finally. "You never tried to," I said softly. "You raised me to serve, not to speak. And I finally learned that love without respect is debt." Her expression faltered, just slightly, but it was enough. The certainty she'd always worn cracked right down the center. Then, from the doorway, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. Eleni. She was still tan from the trip, still wearing designer sunglasses on her head, even though the sky outside was dark. Her voice was already high before she even looked at me. You ruined my life. Do you know how embarrassing this was? People were whispering at the airport. They said we couldn't even pay for our own tickets. I turned to her slowly. You couldn't, I said, calm as ever. Because I did, every time. Her jaw tightened. You're unbelievable. You've always been jealous. That word, jealous, landed like a bad joke. Jealous? I repeated. Of what? Of giving everything and being erased from the picture? Her voice cracked. You're cruel. No, I said quietly. You were careless. There's a difference. The silence afterward was sharp, alive with the sound of rain hammering the windows harder now. My mother stood up, her face drained of color. This isn't what family does, Maris. You're right, I said, picking up my keys from the counter. Family doesn't lie or use someone until she's empty. Whatever this was. I gestured vaguely between us. That wasn't family. That was performance. Eleni folded her arms, trembling, but her voice still hissed with pride. You think selling the villa makes you powerful? No, I said, walking toward the door. It makes me free. I paused, glancing back at both of them. Their faces, once so confident, so self-assured, looked uncertain now, not angry, lost, like people realizing the house they'd lived in for years was never really theirs. The villa was never my home, I said. Neither is this house. I'm moving. My mother gasped. Maris, I'm done paying rent for love, I said, opening the door. The air outside was sharp and cold. Rain hit my face as I stepped out, keys still in hand. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, smaller now, thinner than before. We were only trying to keep the family together, she said weakly. I didn't turn around. You did, I answered. You just forgot I was in it. And then I closed the door. The lock clicked, soft, final, like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. Outside, the rain poured harder. The world smelled like wet concrete and clarity. I walked toward my car, each step steady, deliberate. My phone buzzed in my hand. One new notification. Final payment confirmed. I smiled. Sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's the sound of reclaiming your name. And sometimes it's what fills the room long after you've left it. It had been a week since the confrontation. 1 week since I'd closed the door, walked into the rain, and stepped into a life that, for once, didn't ask me to apologize. Tonight, I found myself standing outside the entrance of a neighborhood charity gala, a fundraiser for women's health scholarships, the kind of event where my mother once paraded me around as a talking point and my sister as a centerpiece. But tonight, I was neither. I was simply present, on my own terms. My dress was simple, black, tailored. My hair was pinned back low, not glamorous, just clean, elegant. As I stepped into the reception hall, the sound shifted, not loud but noticeable. Whispers slid through the crowd like a current. They weren't mean, just curious, unnerved. The kind of whispers that followed women who no longer played by the rules everyone else still followed. I walked in slowly, unbothered. I didn't flinch when I caught the glance of Mrs. Langford, who once invited my mother and Eleni to host wine tastings in her garden, or when I overheard a murmured, "Is that her?" followed by, "She sold the villa, full cash." I didn't need to turn to confirm it. Then, across the room, I noticed a familiar face, the travel agent from the trip. He stood near the back, hands tucked into his pockets, clearly out of place among the pearl necklaces and gala gowns. He caught my gaze and nodded, respectful. "Heard you handled things efficiently," he said, his voice low. I smiled. Let's call it overdue housekeeping. He let out a soft laugh, gave me one more nod, and turned away. I made my way to my table, near the back, away from the spotlight, just the way I wanted it. Halfway through the night, a slideshow played on the main projector. Photos of past donors, events, vacation homes that had once hosted charity dinners. One image appeared, the Santorini villa, its white stone glowing under sunset. Beneath it, a caption, "Donated by Eleni Caldwell, owner." A murmur rippled through the room. Then clearly, a voice from one of the tables. "Didn't she sell it?" The comment wasn't malicious, just pointed. My mother, sitting 2 tables ahead, stiffened. I watched her jaw tighten, eyes forward, pretending not to hear. I didn't flinch. Instead, I let my eyes drift to the napkin on my table. White linen, folded into a simple leaf. The same pattern as the one my mother left on my kitchen table a week ago. This time, I reached for it. Not to keep it, not to press it flat. I folded it again, neatly, then set it beside my plate. I wasn't rejecting her. I was releasing her. Martha arrived late. She slid into the seat beside me with a quiet smile and a glass of champagne. "You look lighter," she said, setting the glass gently in front of me. I met her eyes. "That's because I finally put the weight back where it belonged." We clinked glasses softly. No toast, no need. That moment, 2 women who knew how to rebuild quietly, was enough. Toward the end of the evening, the host approached the podium to announce the year's biggest donor. I didn't pay much attention until she read the plaque. "This year, we'd like to acknowledge a private donor whose generosity allowed us to launch our first ever scholarship fund for underprivileged women pursuing education in caregiving and nursing." Anonymous but impactful. There was a pause, a beat. Then the host smiled and added, "Some of you might know who it is, and some of you won't. But the difference was made, and that's what matters." The room stirred. Eyes turned, some toward me, some away. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Across the room, my mother's hand froze on her wine glass. Eleni looked down, her mouth tight. I didn't even blink. They had taught me to give in silence. I had simply learned to give differently. If they won't call me family, I thought, someone else will call me a reason. As people began standing for dessert and coffee, I gathered my things. I had no appetite for sweets tonight, only the sweet, bitter taste of clarity. As I neared the exit, I passed the donation box at the door. It sat there, half full of envelopes and slips. Without hesitation, I took the folded napkin from my bag, the one I'd saved, and dropped it inside. It landed softly. A final gesture, a quiet surrender, not to them, to myself. Outside, the air was cool and damp. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement like stars in the wrong place. Then, my phone buzzed. A message. From my mother. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back, "Not tonight." And with that, I walked on, not toward an ending, but into a quiet that finally belonged to me. The days that followed were simple, uncomplicated. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent through the night. No guilt-ridden messages, no thinly veiled demands cloaked as concern, just peace. This morning, soft light poured through the sheer curtains of my new apartment. It was smaller, 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, floors that creaked in certain corners. But the sunlight made everything feel expansive. The space smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleaner. A new beginning. I was barefoot, a cup of coffee warming my hands, as I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by boxes. Most were already opened, half unpacked. Clothes folded into drawers, books slotted neatly into shelves. Only one box remained sealed, labeled in my own handwriting, Memories. I sat cross-legged beside it and opened the top. Inside, carefully packed between old linen and tissue paper, were fragments of years I had long tried to forget. A birthday card from my father, the last one before he stopped remembering my name. A photo of me and Delaney at a school recital. She grinning, me with a hand on her shoulder, and at the very bottom, a seashell. I smiled. Santorini. I had picked it up just off the beach years ago. At the time, I thought it would be a symbol of something eternal, a piece of a dream I'd helped build. I lifted it to my ear. The echo inside was faint, like the sea from far away, soft, steady, still alive even now. They took the house, the trip, the illusion of family, I whispered aloud, but they couldn't take me. I sat with that thought for a moment, letting it sink into my bones. I didn't feel triumphant, just clean. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always mean calling someone back into your life. Sometimes it just means you no longer carry them with you. My eyes fell on something else tucked among the photos. A folded napkin, linen, shaped into a leaf. I chuckled under my breath. That napkin had followed me like a ghost through every chapter of this unraveling. First on a dinner table, then a lawyer's desk, then into a donation box. And now here it was again, not as a symbol of burden, but simply fabric, a thing, nothing more. I unfolded it, ran my fingers along the seams, and then placed it beside my coffee cup. I didn't need to throw it away. It didn't scare me anymore. A soft buzz came from my phone. Martha. Lunch today? I'll bring the good wine. I smiled, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed, only if you let me pay this time. The reply came almost instantly. Deal, but I'm still choosing the wine. I laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet space like sunlight through a window. This wasn't about who paid. It was about choosing to give, because I wanted to, not because I was supposed to. I stood, stretching, and walked toward the balcony. The breeze rolled in from the bay, salt-tinged and cool. Seagulls coasted on the wind above the water, the kind of calm that doesn't demand attention but holds it anyway. I used to think family meant forgiveness, no matter what, I thought aloud. Now I know, it also means boundaries. And sometimes loving yourself is the only way to teach others what love should look like. I took a sip of my coffee, the mug warm in my palms. From here, the ocean shimmered, quiet and endless. Not Santorini, but it was mine. They lost a villa, I said, smiling softly. I found peace. I let the words hang in the air, honest and whole. I'd say I got the better deal.